hosted by the Center of Society and Policy IISc and the Indian Urban Data Exchange. For those who have joined us for the first time, Data Dialogues are a talk series facilitating discussions around advancements in data space. Today we would like to, or we would be discussing on the topic titled Causation of Data as a Social Good. We are very fortunate to have Mr. Ashish Agarwal, the Vice President and Head Public Policy from NASSCOM this evening to share his thoughts and bring more light into the discussions on datafication. So datafication is the growing presence, use, and impact of data in social processes in a worldwide phenomena, including the domain of national and international development. Datafication comes with much promise around the benefits it will bring to planning, development, and policy making. This talk throws light on the role of regulatory policies and public digital infrastructure in ensuring that data sharing is directed towards meaningful outcomes for marginalized communities and its potential ill effects such as exclusion are minimized. I would request all the participants to please hold their questions towards the end of the talk and we could open the floor for discussions with the speaker. Let me also take this opportunity to introduce our speaker of the day. Mr. Ashish Agarwal has led the NASSCOM engagement with the industries, regulators, and government on policy and regulatory frameworks. His key focus is on data, e-commerce platforms, fintech, and all regulatory regulations impacting emerging technologies and tech-led businesses. At the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, he led the technical assistance to Indian Ministry of Finance on regulating of financial products, digital payments, and consumer protection. As an entrepreneur, he has co-incubated a technology-led social enterprise to enable low-income workers to save for old age and was a part of the team that helped the government design the National Pension Scheme. So now, over to you, sir. I think you can start off the talk right away.
Thanks, Parvati. So I must say that this is a very interesting topic. It's a topic which should also, if I were to think about it, we are at a very early stage when we can say that we are making significant progress in terms of being able to use data for social good. In fact, we are at a very, very early starting stage, and therefore having this discussion and building on this is going to be paramount, both from the role of the industry, of course, but also the state and all the various actors who need to participate in this. And I was just thinking about it, since the first time when I was asked to probably speak on this topic. There are a lot of areas where use of data can have huge impact in a positive sense. So just in terms of, what are the key problems facing the country or problems which would probably be left unattended if we did not apply good policy making, both in terms of decisions and also in terms of the outcomes. Parvati talked about my introduction and she talked about my work in the area of social security earlier. One of the big challenges which will face India over the next 30-40 years is the challenge of old age income security as our population enters into old age. You know that today over 60-70% of the people are under 35 years of age, and we are living in this demographic dividend. And given the fact that a bulk of our population is low income, a bulk of our population is engaged in physical labor, therefore their ability to live a dignified life in retirement, and they don't have retirement really, but in old age is going to be a significant challenge. So just being able to look at that data and then to think of a product design leading up to the architecture of the new pension system. I think that is a journey that India made about a decade back. And I've spoken to people in other countries who would like to do the same. I'm talking about Asian countries because this is a probably a South-South kind of a challenge and somewhat of an Asian challenge in terms of the way our workforce is. And it has been very difficult to do this just because of the fact that there are so many other incentives that are going to be at work. And that's a challenge. So the problem statement that I'm trying to bring to the table is to say that you can go from no data to more data and to a lot of data. And you can also have ability to use that data for social good. And you can deal with a lot of other things in terms of what technology can enable. But even with that all in place, what you will actually face is a lot of design level incentive alignment issues, which will further make it challenging to actually uh, deliver those outcomes which we intend. So just a case of point in case of even the a new pension scheme, while it's a well-designed scheme, participation of the lower income workforce on a voluntary basis into that scheme continues to be a challenge. And again, data is very useful and instructive as to can we think of an compulsory opt-in and then think of an opt-out on the participation side. And similarly, on the government side, given that the change was from a defined benefit to a contributory scheme, we are just now seeing after a decade a couple of states thinking of going back on the decision of joining the NPS and reverting to the old defined pension scheme. So that's just one example of saying that you can use data to design good policies, but then you would have a continuous challenge. Health protection is a significant challenge which I think India faces. And again, in the marginalized section of the society, the challenge is not about critical illnesses, but it is about more simple OPD level treatment being available at an affordable level and being accessible to everybody. I think a lot of progress has been made. There is a lot of work which has happened in terms of looking at data to bring down the cost of healthcare itself, and to also identify which are those particular benefits as part of that health delivery, which are going to make the greatest amount of impact to the society. But again, if I were to look at a pan-India level, have we reached a stage where there is a very good utilization of health insurance among the marginalized section to the extent that we can say that we have delivered? I think it's a very good work in progress, but given the magnitude of challenge, I think this is an area which will continue to kind of occupy the space, and I think this is an area which requires a lot of attention. Access to credit among marginalized section. I mean, some would feel that there is over availability of credit given the way microfinance has developed over the last couple of decades. But again, credit can be awfully expensive. A lot of people still borrow from friends and family or from a local money lender. They don't have collateral, the society that we are talking about. So to be able to deliver them affordable credit, not just any credit, I think this is something where I think we are seeing progress. But again, I would hold my judgment on where we have reached. But I think ability to use non-credit data to lower the cost of credit and improve its accessibility is an area which is very interesting, and I think some progress has been made there. But again, if you look at it, the credit data which is available with CIBIL and other rating agencies, in some sense that data gets played within the regulated entities itself. So if a wider participation of fintech is required, because they have their own data sources, but in order to have a more holistic approach in terms of how data can be used to deliver affordable credit to a marginal society, I think that's some kind of a work in progress. And I'll just highlight a couple of more areas in terms of the challenges. I think just to look at the way the biases play out, and I'm using women as an example, but it could be you could have many other examples of thinking about biases, and so society's biases reflect in how we think of data or lack of data, and then what we do about it. So so women, of course, live longer. They do more unpaid labor. They have fewer promotions. They get paid less. All of this is uh, uh, in some way, there are many studies which will talk about all of this. How does it all impact a lifetime earning of a woman, therefore, and what is it, therefore, is required as an intervention to throw more transparency into this and to get a little more of discussion going. I think this is just an example of saying that when we are thinking of biases, are we looking at addressing them? And the last area which I want to mention at a high level is the entire sphere of town planning. Uh, Given the fact that as a nation, we are centered around these large cities, which are magnet of economic activity, and we have, I think there is this huge push or a need or an aspiration to have, can we have the next 100 cities? I won't even go 100. I mean, let's say next 50 cities to actually develop and grow up. And when you broadly, if you look at the map of India, you would find that this problem is probably more acute in the northern part of the country, where, for example, if you look at Delhi, then Gurgaon, of course, adjacent, Noida is okay, growing up. But what are the other cities which can take the load? Comparatively, if you look at the map in South, you would find that there are a few more cities which are not so distant a second, and so on and so forth. Similarly, in Maharashtra or the western side, you'll find that there are some centers, but they are way, way far away from Mumbai when we think of, uh, how our nation has developed in terms of cities till now. So if you want to do that in terms of moving towards a stage when we can have more cities developed, I think it'll take a lot. And there are a lot of variables and parameters and stuff involved. Not and data is, of course, something that can play an important role in terms of how we think about our population patterns, the future projection in terms of growth, and so on and so forth. But even within the existing cities which are growing, and all of that is happening, I think the use of data to do better town planning is, for lack of a better word, in my mind, still a bit of a work in progress. Uh, we can take examples. We can think about it. Uh, uh, and I'll give you 2-3 examples which come top of my mind. Airports. I think we have had a few world-class airports come up over a decade and so in the country. But have we really used the data to its optimum in terms of when we think of overall design elements, or are these some of these decisions have actually resulted in unintended exclusions? Are there airports where you can actually walk to a hotel in India? Uh, I don't think so. I mean, you could try it, you could actually succeed if you were determined, but it's not a reality. It is not a design sense which is built into these airports, though there are walkable hotels from some of the newer airports that we see in our country. Just in terms of optimizing traffic management flows, I think maps by default are great optimizers, use of data to optimally use the existing resources, and all of that. And I think that's in some sense a great use of data. But how are we using it to design better? Uh, let's take let's take an example. Let's say a university is coming up in an area, or a academic institution, or anything which will attract a lot of people. Uh, but just the way we think about, I think there'll be a last mile jam, and wherever you do it, whatever happens after a few years, there will be a last mile jam, because we wouldn't have thought about parking, we wouldn't have thought about the congestion in the nearby areas, and all of this can be simulated. So I think there is a lot which we can think about just in terms of optimizing our city spaces and how we use data. There are some interesting stuff. So, I mean, Thane is a good example of how they've used uh, data to optimally use water resources, and they're able to pinpoint the days when water utilization would be more and less, and which are the areas where there is more supply required, and probably 15% optimization is what that has resulted for them. In the city of Varanasi, there is a great example in terms of solid waste management, just in terms of optimizing the routes and collection of the waste and so on and so forth, all using a smartphone app. And I think it has resulted in about 17 crore odd rupees of savings per annum. When I was looking at all of these examples, what struck me was that unlike in a lot of other policies where you could take a Western construct and kind of think about it in the Indian context, but when we think of social good in the Indian context at the scale we are in as in India, and just the way our demographics are as compared to, let's say, the world, I don't think we will get enough inspirational ideas from the other countries. Not to say that there aren't ideas in other countries. So, for example, the city of Chicago has done some good work in terms of food system food inspection and its outcomes. So basically using data to say that which establishment are likely to or have past record of more violations, and therefore optimizing inspections. I think that's one kind of example which is interesting. San Francisco has also done a good utilization of data where they are able to map high injury street corridors and so on and so forth. But the larger point I'm making is that given India's challenges, given India's scale, given the fact that 70% of our population is low income, doing some sort of physical manual work, unorganized informal sector, given the entire heterogeneity of our country, how we think of data as a lever for social good, it will require a whole of government approach, which currently is a work in progress, and I'll talk about that a little bit. From an industry perspective, I think the good thing is that there are a lot of technologies which are now available and which will make a lot of these ideas and objectives actually implementable. And hello. Sorry. So all right. So essentially, I was talking about the government and the whole of government approach. So just in terms of formal policies, I think we are just a decade into this. We started with NDSAP in 2012 and the promise of open data. I think it's a great policy for the first time in government putting out a lot of data sets and so on and so forth. And I think some useful good has also come out of it. But if you were to look at it critically, I think the biggest grouse against that has been the lack of updated data. And if I may add, incomplete data too. So, so I think from that, we have made progress, and now we are thinking about a draft framework for non-personal data in terms of data governance, and that there is a framework which is under public consultation as we speak. And I was in a consultation where Minister of State for IT was talking about it. And it's interesting that the idea of whole of government approach is coming in from there. But again, I think the larger challenge will be to actually operationalize the policy, not necessarily to design a policy well. And there are a whole lot of stuff which I think will be challenging when we think about a government actually implementing executing a policy where more data will be available in a up-to-date, real-time fashion, data which is actually relevant and useful, and so on and so forth. And this is an area, I think, huge area to watch out for. Some of the states have also got their own open data policies, but these have been fairly nascent. So you can always find in all of these areas which I've talked about some pilots, some studies, some good implementation. But when you think of India scale, I think we have a lot to go for in terms of future. So when I'm talking of scale, just comes to my mind, there is this employment guarantee scheme, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And a lot has been said about the data about that scheme. And I would not go into all of that and not try and get into any of the areas which may be controversial. But the simple point which I'm trying to make is that over the years, so much of that data has come out in public, and which has led to a lot of debate, discussion, led to programs being redrawn, perhaps made more efficient, and also concerns around corruption in the actual leakage associated with such policies have significantly been addressed at various levels. So that's one example of scale, right? There used to be something called the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which got then rebranded as other programs and so on and so forth. And I think that has been also a work in progress success. And that's something which I talked in the beginning about in terms of health as an interesting area. So I think stepping back and just maybe bringing one or two more ideas onto the table. I don't know, you must be aware, I'm guessing, of the idea of unified health interface. I think it's a interesting idea. It relies a lot on data, and it tries to replicate in the health space what the UPI has done in the payment space. And obviously, it's a very it's not an apple to apple comparison, and the scope and the challenge is probably X times more in this interface. But we have spoken to the government. We are in touch with them. A lot of our industry, for example, you are aware of platforms where now you can do a whole lot of stuff. You can get diagnostic online. You can get your test done. You can avail a whole lot of services, and the entire COVID piece. And by the way, COVID itself is a very good example of using data to tackle COVID-related challenges. But I wouldn't want to talk about that. That's probably well understood by everybody. But coming back to this idea of unified health interface, I think it's a very powerful idea. What it intends to do is to unbundle this entire design, where only certain platforms could have proprietary tools and technologies to bring together the stakeholders. But basically, anybody who is on the supply side, and of course the consumer on the need side, can connect over this interface through the apps of their choice. Like you have various apps for UPI, and perhaps connect with any kind of health service or health product provider, and that could bring in a whole lot of efficiency and access to health services. So again, this is an idea which is an early stage, but something that I think holds a lot of promise. So there are also some interesting ideas which we can think of, when you look ahead. That and all of the ideas which I've already talked about, I think a lot of them are in work in progress. So we do need to see the success of them happen at scale. But interestingly, Niti Aayog is currently looking at use of data to just get the ecosystem around electronic vehicle batteries going, just by trying to see that how so much of the data can be available that it becomes easier for people to locate access to battery, and for the entire ecosystem to know where adequate and appropriate number of charge batteries are available, and so on and so forth. Another area is that in real time, can you know the occupancy levels in public transport, so that you can plan your travel. Delhi Metro is experimenting this with this, and I think it is something, when you think about it again in terms of biases, typically you take an average and you do your planning, right? As a state, as town planning, and you plan things for an average. But when you start thinking in terms of the elderly population, I think the averages then become distorted kind of a data for them in many ways. So I think it can help elderly people plan their travel better, hopefully going forward. And just when I talked about this example, another thing which occurred to me immediately was that even let's say the walk time, when we think of from A to B, in terms of designing facilities and thinking of that. If you use average time, it's again can be very distorting for especially the elderly population. So I think in terms of overall, the key message which I want to convey is that there is a huge amount of work that has happened in terms of wanting to use data for social good. We have seen that at a level of central government. We have seen that at the level of state governments. I have not yet talked about the academia, but I think a lot is happening there. There are a lot of good projects which are happening at various IITs. Uh, these are looking at biases. These are looking at fintech, and these are looking at just uh, technologies which can make data available in a more useful fashion. As in my present role as NASSCOM, the the key message that we are talking with the industry and the government is that it is not about more data, but it is about our ability to utilize data effectively for social good, for public good, for overall economic good. And I think the idea of data exchanges is a powerful idea. It's I think there is place in India for multiple such data exchanges, for specialized data exchanges. The incentive around those data exchanges have to be use case led. I think there is only so much of central planning which we can do as a nation, where we can think about certain ideas and then take them forward. And again, I think the approach has evolved. So we are not in the space the way we used to do central planning maybe even a decade back. So even the example which I mentioned about the unified health interface, because it's at a level where you're thinking of creating an ecosystem, but then leaving out the use cases for the broader ecosystem players to actually develop and for the benefits to reveal themselves through innovation and all of that. So I think the approach of central planning itself has undergone some change for good. Is one of the things that I want to talk about. Yeah, so I'm just thinking, is there anything very specific which I might have made notes for and which I have not spoken about? Yeah, so the one message which I left earlier, the fact that we could get a lot right on the data side. We could get a lot of, for example, over the next few years, we could have a lot of annotated data, which has been a big challenge when you think of, being able to utilize data. That should make significant progress over the next few years. I think the rollout of much awaited 5G, I think it has been so much of false start, if I were to use that word. But I think now DOT just rolling out the auction documents and hopefully us seeing that happening. I think a lot of the data utilization in terms of just use cases and given India's strength in applications, we should see that panning out well over the next few years too. And then lastly, on the technology side, I think the fairness of algorithms that has been in focus over the recent years. And I think there are standards which organizations are now trying to consider and deploy, and they're very conscious of at least attempting to ensure that the biases do not creep up unintentionally. Just, I think in the context of health, one example, you must be aware the entire use of oximeters. So because when initially the oximeters were designed in the 80s, not enough data was tested on the Black population, which meant that the readings for the Black people did not reflect properly. So again, just an example, but to say that now there is a whole lot of consciousness, but again, we will see much more of bias related challenges and problems play out when we think of data. There is so I want to stop now. I think I've probably laid out a few broad areas and happy to pick up discussion on any of any of the topics or things which I may have even forgotten or skipped speaking about, or anything that you think you were expecting me as wearing an ASCOM hat to talk about, but I actually didn't, or anything else you have to say, we can actually have a discussion now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. I think we can ask the audience if they could raise their hands for any questions. We could throw questions too. Okay, we have Ravi. If you can unmute, then you can start speaking.
Yeah, good evening, sir. I'm Ravindra Singh. I'm the CEO of ELCITA, Electronic City Industrial Township Authority in Bangalore. We do have a small township here, around 903 acres, but we have a small smart city program going here. We have collated a lot of data of various operations that we carry out. So we have got a huge database with us, but we're looking at how we can actually capitalize on this data to take us to the next level of doing a bit of data analytics. And so trying to understand from you, from your experience, how can you guide us to ensure that we get the best value out of the data that we have?
Ravi, I'm not necessarily the best person to answer this, given I wear more of a policy hat, but I think, I don't know, are you connected with the ecosystem? Because you're not alone. Are there groups which you observe where conversations are happening around this? That will be very interesting. And actually, that's a question from my side back to you. Are you seeing more conversations around this? Are there groups talking about this? And if not, then I think this is something which is a huge gap, because we need to definitely have a more connected ecosystem.
So if that is not existing, at least I'm not aware of any such this thing which is being done. So if a platform can be created where we can share ideas, because see, there's so many smart cities cropping up across the country. So getting data is just one part of it. But if I'm not utilizing my data to give me some intelligent information or intelligence for me to action on, I don't see the relevance of actually just collecting data. So if something could be done at the policy level also to ensure that this is done, it would be great. At least create a platform where this can be taken to the next level.
Where are you located?
Bangalore.
So Karnataka rolled out a state level innovation scheme. I don't know. Have you heard of that scheme?
No, I haven't heard of it, sir.
Okay. We had worked on it last year. I think it's an interesting scheme. It allows various stakeholders to connect to the government on this very broad umbrella of innovation. But right. So I take your feedback, Ravi, and happy to also connect offline. And I'm happy to then put this query into the broader NASCOM ecosystem. And perhaps there might be something already which we can kind of,
would be highly obliged, sir, in case this can be done, because we already started off in a very small way. Whatever we could understand, what we could derive, what we could analyze, we are doing that. But I think in a more structured way with support from the industry, it will be great so that we can all of us can move together. In fact, we are contributors to the IODX also. We are giving a lot of data there. So we are enabling other smart cities also to imbibe from whatever we have learned. So if that exchange happens at the next level also, it would be wonderful.
Okay, that's excellent. I'm just putting down my email address in the chat. So in case of, while the organizers already have it, in case it makes sense, you want to reach out.
Yes, sir. It will be wonderful, sir, in case you can share that.
Okay, yeah. We can have a few more conversations and questions.
Looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you, Ravi. I think we have got another question from Rupsa. Rupsa, could you ask?
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, but
Hello?
a very feeble voice. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, sir. I had a question. Like, personal data also contains a lot of information. So how can such data be? How can we use that data for policy prescriptions?
Okay, so that is something I think it's easy to answer probably, but I think while these are areas where a lot has been said, but a very standardized approach, even which could happen based on the nature of this personal data. For example, when you look at financial data, when you look at health data, it has different level of risk associated and so on and so forth. I think the entire work that needs to be done at the level of how can the anonymized data be made available, how can encrypted data be available in a manner that it can be used for public good purposes by researchers, by government. I think this is an area where there's a huge amount of work that has to be done, starting from awareness. So definitely technologies exist, but are we optimally able to utilize it? I think it's a work in progress. And I think one challenge which remains is that at a policy level also, where there is a space for discussion, is that what happens when such anonymized data or such encrypted data is again de-anonymized or unencrypted, then where do the liability and risk lie? I think that's a bit of an open space, which hopefully can be addressed even when the new personal data protection law, which has been in works and which I understand now should be coming out soon. And I think that that are also calls out for the fact that, for policy making, data can be made available, and the access of that data can be sought by government agencies and so on and so forth. So I think that entire it's a bit of a that thing has been placed in the bill as one particular section. So yes, safeguards are going to be key. And I think there, given the heterogeneity and capacities in various departments and agencies at a state level, I think it's going to be some time before we get to a mature level on that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Hi. Any other questions? I just had one, so I'll just pop in before another person asks another question. So, Ashish, we just realized that there are a lot of silo effects happening. People working with data, or people working with, just we heard Ravi speaking about them working on the electronic city data, and they've shared it with IUDs, but there's a lot of silos at work happening here and there with the data itself. Is government looking at something wherein they can try to say, bring all this into a single effort and try to see it on a larger, broader scale? So that's when we could actually develop good policies or concrete policies, is my hunch. What's your thoughts on it?
So you are absolutely right, Parvati. I think the silo approach is not, it has its reasons, right? So obviously, everybody's trying to solve a particular problem. A lot of people are not having data or studying data for an academic purpose or for a very larger open public good. They are part of solving something which could be at scale, which could be having a public good nature, but it would still be a project or something. So it's natural for them to be looking at that and focusing on that. Within the government also, similarly, it's very project driven, and governments usually have shelf life of 5 years. So planning, these require at least a longer time frame to think for, and you have to think of decades when you start thinking of a very concerted kind of efforts, because what you are trying to do is not to crystal ball gaze into the future, but what you're trying to do is to put systems in place so that data can be used optimally for policy decision and policy implementation. Now that's a lot of hard work. It is not going to happen in a day. It's going to take months, years to do that, and the benefits will be seen into the future. So there's a huge lag there. So I think that creates certain incentive challenges at various levels. But having said all of this, I think I mentioned the national data framework, which the government is currently doing a consultation on. And there is a clear realization that within the government that we need a whole of government approach to make it happen. So in that sense, I think we are at stage one where we are acknowledging, we are realizing the problem, we know that we need to fix it, and then it's a way forward there. I saw a question in chat. I think
Yeah. Jyotirmoy has a
maybe.
question. She asks, how does the quality of data impact policy design?
So
would like
Yeah,
to add on to
yeah.
it?
If I may jump in,
Sure, please.
I, yeah. So I'm Jyotirmay. I work for IODX, and a lot of time, one of the very fundamental issues which we face is regarding the quality of data. So we are getting large chunks of data. However, much of that data does not say adhere to a particular format. It is incomplete. And when we talk of say data centric approaches, many times that data does not actually contribute to a meaningful decision. So my question to you, sir, is that have you ever come across these kind of issues where the quality of data has impacted, I mean, how does it impact the policy design? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so absolutely,
Jyotirmay.
Jyotirmoy. Yeah, Jyotirmoy. Sorry. So it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you don't have strict controls in terms of what data you are able to get, then obviously the policy or any kind of a analysis of that data is going to be poor and suboptimal. So I think that's pretty much given. So I think the work where there is a role for various stakeholders, including the government, is to look at standards in terms of defining the quality of the data, and then being very clear that okay, for what purpose that data could eventually be used for. And I think that's an entire area which is a huge challenge and a work in progress. So I would think that today, in pretty much in a lot of areas, we can say that uh, the data of quality can be improved. But having said that, I think there's also scope for looking at how can we use technology to ignore some of the bad data. So can we do machine learning in a manner where you can train the algorithm to ignore bad data, and but again, it's a matter of I'm not a data scientist, but or an expert in technology in that sense. But I think there is a scope for technology to minimize some of these challenges of because you can't completely ignore or eliminate bad data is my hunch, but definitely it impacts in terms of quality data. And the other thing is also that sometimes we also have this again incentive incompatibility problem. So if you want to show that India has got rid of poverty, then probably you use the data which probably helps you show that. And if you are on the other side, you want to show that India has gone deeper into poverty, then probably use the data which probably you think will help show that as an outcome. So I think the ability to take a very where the data methodology is very strong, where the sampling is robust, and all of that. I think it exists in statistics. I don't think it's a rocket science. It's a new thing, but I think it's a question of how well we can implement it in a manner. And one simple way of implementing it is to be very transparent about it. So anybody who is using data at scale must be publishing their methodology and their technique and their data sources in a manner where an independent researcher can look at it and drive a comfort level on the design of what kind of data is coming in, and so on and so forth. That's my limited understanding on this, Jyotirmoy. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Ravi, you have another question?
Sorry, not me. I'm done.
Okay, you seem to have raised your hand, so that's why.
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
No issue. And do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, so I don't see any other questions. Okay, so then we'll call it a meeting if there are no more discussions then. Great. So thank you so much, sir. With that, we come to the end of the webinar today. I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to, on behalf of the Center of Society and Policy, IAC and IUDX, to Mr. Ashish Agarwal to have taken out time to address this very pertinent topic to our August gathering. I definitely had a great time, and I hope our participants did too. Looking forward to all of you, and thank you so much for taking out time, sir. And I think we discussed a little bit about data and its benefits to the society. Since we are still in the nascent stage, so I think more thoughts and more points would come in as years pass by, and most probably we'll have you and again as a speaker for the next or in future data dialogue sessions. So we might have fruitful discussions then.
So thanks, Parvati. I think what I can say is that we got connected through this particular topic and all of that, right? But we would actually, I would be interested in a little more of this dialogue going beyond just this conversation, and because we work a lot with the government on policy side, central and state both. And I think it will be very good if we can connect through you into the ecosystem where we can have some of these more conversations about the real action, so as to speak, as to where a lot of this is happening in terms of some of the challenges and use cases, because then it will help us bring about some sort of convergence, and we can also bring in some of the industry players into the conversation, and governments, state and center. So think about it. It's an interesting thought in my mind, at least.
Sure, definitely, sir. I'll get you connected soon. Offline, we'll take this forward. I'm definitely interested, so I'll just get into speaking to the mentors also into this. Looking forward to having a conversation with you very soon. And for the participants, looking forward to have you guys again for the next webinar to come. Thank you all. Thanks for taking out your time to be part of this. Wishing you all a very happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.